the true site of Thermopylae. To an extent we may trace the manoeuvres of Xerxes in this expedition to overthrow Athens, which took place shortly before the destruction of Babylon. As he marched his vast conscript army westward through Thrace and Macedonia, his fleet sailed round the coast to seek battle with the Greeks, and eventually it reached the western highlands and Hebrides. Having passed through the Aegean Sea, probably so named after the monster Aegeos or Aegeon, hence the Isle of Egg, the fleet proceeded to the Strait of Euripus, the Sound of Mull, situated between Euboea, Mull, and the Magnesian coast of Thessaly, Morven. Hearing that the Athenian ships were cruising round the mouth of the Peneus, Loch and the Firth of Lorn, the Persians sent a strong squadron round Euboea to force them into Euripus, where the main Persian fleet was waiting to entrap them. This strategy was defeated by a severe gale in that stormy sea, which drove the Persian ships off Euboea upon the reefs, in which the entire squadron was wrecked about the hollows of Euboea. The hollows agree with the notoriously dangerous Tauran rocks off the southern shore of Mull. The Athenians advanced nevertheless against the Persian fleet, being superior sailors and knowing their home waters. But after indecisive actions they retreated southward to Salamis, and the Persians sailed up the Peneus River, Loch, anchored near Thermopylae, which is the pass of Glencoe, and were permitted by Xerxes to view the scene of the epic fight where Leonidas and his army had died to a man defending the pass. Here is one more sidelight on this war. When Xerxes was yet in Macedonia, in the region of Inverness, from whence he could espy the Olympus mountains, the Loch range, he was taken in a galley to view the scene of the Deucalion deluge, the flood of Noah, and observing the gorge between Olympus, Ben Nevis. Here is one more insight on this war. When Xerxes was yet in Macedonia, in the region of Inverness, from whence he could espy the Olympus mountains, the Loch range, he was taken in a galley to view the scene of the Deucalion deluge, the flood of Noah, and observing the gorge between Olympus, Ben Nevis, Pelion, Craig Magid, and Ossa, probably Anach Beg, he observed, "Nothing more is needed than to turn the river upon their lands by an embankment which should fill the gorge and force the stream from its present channel, and lo, all of Thessaly, except the mountains, would be at once laid under water." This is entirely in accordance with the terrain around Ben Nevis, and in descending from the Loch Ness and Loch Lochy, Xerxes would sight the gorge through which runs the river Speen, falling into Lochy River at Muckamere Falls, surrounded on either side and hemmed in by the high mountains, their flanks marked by what are termed parallel roads, actually sea beaches mentioned earlier, from 1278 feet above sea level at Glengloy, visible from Loch Lochy, to various levels of 1,140 feet, 1,059 feet and 847 feet. Geikie, the eminent geologist, held views similar to those held by Xerxes some 300 years earlier. Geikie was of the opinion that immense glaciers may have held up the waters, but he could not account for their presence. He was unaware that they related to the flood of Deucalion or Noah. The significance of the visit of Xerxes is that he could not have gone secretly in a galley from Macedonia to Thessaly in present Greece, except by the open sea, risking capture or worse, yet he went safely by water to spy out the terrain. The classic map of Thessaly in fact completely fails to meet the circumstances. Mount Olympus is placed at the extreme north of Thessaly, as is correct of Ben Nevis in Argyleshire, the true Thessaly, but Mount Pindus is put at the extreme west, whereas Aristotle states that the deluge occurred west of Pindus, and Thermopylae is given the very south of Thessaly, with the Pindus range to its northwest over 60 miles distant as the crow flies, whereas these mountains lay to its east. Zarsius obviously saw the traces of the deluge in the parallel roads, for the topography applies completely to the Western Highlands and in no single respect to modern Greece. The same contention applies equally to the pass of Thermopylae, for the terrain indicates that it could only relate to the dread pass of Glencoe, and at once explains how the Persian ships could have sailed up the Peneus River, Loch Lin, to the Gulf of Malis, Loch Leven, whereas in modern Greece it is 70 miles distant from the Gulf of Malis. In western Scotland, the Speen, the Peneus, runs rapidly through the great mountain basin of the Lochaber range, swelled in times of spate by the waters of dozens of highland burns, swirls through the Macamer Falls, and then, after uniting its waters with the widening river called the Loch, both merge into the river Loch Lin, the Loch Lin, upper and lower. Of course, after coursing through Inverlochy Glen, the stream reaches Loch Leven, formerly Mali, now Kilmally, the Church of Mali, answering to the Gulf of Malis, on whose southern shores lies the entrance to the pass of Glencoe. It can therefore be readily understood how and why the Persians from the western shores could sail 22 miles or so from the mouth of Loch Lin to the Gulf of Malis, Loch Leven, to inspect Thermopylae, and how Zarsius from the other end could sail down from the direction of Loch Ness to inspect the marks of the Deucalion deluge on the mountain flanks, but not by any other means. At the mouth of Thermopylae, the Hellenes had erected a fort, or a wall of loose stones, and narrowed down the entrance to fit only 2 men at a time, and, as Herodotus tells us, they were prepared to defend it to a man. Leonidas held the enemy here at bay until a man of Trachis showed the enemy another very rough path, by which means they took the Spartans in the rear. Examination of the gorge of Glencoe from the southern end of Loch Leven confirms the fact that a few resolute men could hold the pass there against a multitude, as was known to the hero Leonidas and his followers. This other pass, called Anopia by Herodotus, was rough, climbing, steep and rarely used. Here the Spartan king had placed 1,000 Phocians, but when they saw masses of Persians clambering up the gully sides, they became panic-stricken and fled. The Anopian Pass may be sought in the narrow, steep and rugged defile much nearer to Kinloch Leven, which if climbed from the eastern side could cut off defenders at the mouth of Glencoe like rats in a trap. Its Gallic name is Anacor Athar Big, and it's also known to many as the Devil's Staircase. Once through the pass of Thermopylae, all roads were open to Zarsius, Phocis, Lorcus, the Peloponnese and Athens. One road lay past Doris, a tiny area not over 3.5 miles in circumference, which led to Achaia and Locris, Curor, to this day a strip of alluvial land bordering on Loch Lin. The Achaeans, a brave, chivalrous but sporadic clan, were congregating along the banks of the Peneus in the present Absinthe and Benderloch region, between Dura and Dunstafn Castle. There were the roads open to Delphi and Athens, Dumbarton, at the mercy of the enormous armament brought by the Persian king. But this much must suffice. I've said enough perhaps to convince some, at least, of my readers that these heroic and important events took place in bonny Scotland, to which the world owes a debt of freedom it can never repay.